Shalom, this is Rabbi Mark Kunis and my Taste of Torah for Parshat Shlach Lecha 5780. In this week's Torah portion, 10 of the 12 spies Moses sent to spy out the Promised Land to get the Jewish people excited about their new home, instead came back and told them that although the land is wonderful, the inhabitants are fierce and they will never be able to conquer it. This evil report created such havoc and lack of faith that they, quote, died in a plague before God. The Sforno in his commentary tells us that this plague was midah keneged midah, measure for measure. They complained about the very air of the Promised Land choking its inhabitants, and so this plague forced them to gasp for air so that they couldn't breathe. We can understand this plague's devastating effects, but how can we understand our coronavirus plague? Rabbi Benjamin Black tells the story of a heroic emergency room physician who, without regard for her personal safety, tended to dying coronavirus patients. She described how death by COVID-19 is a painful and withdrawn-out process of gasping for life-giving breath, leaving many last words of a desperate plea, "Help, I can't breathe." George Floyd also pleaded for air with his last words, "Help, I can't breathe." This time the cause of death was racism rather than the plague. There is no denying that the two greatest threats to our world are plague and prejudice. Both have the potential to destroy civilization as we know it. When a person dies, we say he or she expired. The word comes from the Latin ex, which means out, and spiritus, or spirit, soul, breath. Death, Rabbi Blech notes, is the moment that undoes what is described in the beginning of the Torah, where it says, "And Hashem, God, formed the human being of the dust from the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life." Breath is what gives us life. It's what makes us human, in that we have an essence, a spark of God within us. Without it, we are no longer human and we die. To prevent us from expiring, we need to be inspired, to reanimate our souls. While no one can truly comprehend or justify our great global pandemic now, there are vital lessons that have arisen that can profoundly inspire us. Like the wealthy executive who recently shared, "This is the first time in 25 years that I have eaten dinner together every night with my wife and kids as a family. That I've had the time to catch my breath, to read, to think, to talk with my loved ones." Perhaps in our forced time out over the past few months, we may realize how great a blessing it is to be able to stop and catch our breath before we become incapable of breathing. So too in the aftermath of the racist murder of George Floyd, from whom was cruelly taken the God-given gift of breath, we need to be inspired to relearn the simple truth that we are all created in the image of God. The reason God created the entire world with the creation of a single human being, the Talmud teaches, is to remind us that he who destroys one person is as if he destroys an entire world. The tragedy of George Floyd's death needs to be followed by more than protest. If it is to have meaning, it should inspire us to generate a healing breath of God's Spirit, that every human being is a child of God, that every human being is created in God's image. Have a great Shabbos.